welcome to day 4, our unintentional bonus day for the Nativity Stitch Along. So today we're going to finish Joseph's head, Mary's head, and the star. So then all we have left are the stitches in the bodies. So if we look at our diagram here, you can see there is what I call a random puff stitch, and we're going to use 6 strands of 840 on Joseph, and then on Mary there's some French knots. We're going to start with Joseph, and we're going to make a random puff stitch, and we're going to use 6 strands. Now up until now we've been using 3 strands, and we're using our smaller needle. And depending on how you've used your floss, especially if you have a kit, you might just have a long section of 3 strands left. So something you can do to get 6 strands is to thread your 3 strands onto a needle, your small needle, as you normally would, but then you're going to pull both ends together, and then you'd anchor these together, and then you'd be stitching with 6 strands of floss. Now, because I was stitching off of my stash, I don't have a section of 840 left, so I've just cut a new section of 840, and that's just all 6 strands straight off the skein. And because I have 6 strands going through the needle, I'm using my bigger needle, which is a size 3. So we're going to start over here in Joseph. Now, what I call a random puff stitch is less a stitch and more a method for stitching. So you can start anywhere you want. I'm going to start over here, just on the edge. And what we're going to do is we're going to make a series of intersecting X's, pretty much. So you can see my first stitch here. I don't want to pull it down tight to the fabric. It's got a little bit of space under it. And this is going to give it some awesome texture. And then I'm just going to come up in another spot, very much at random, and make another intersecting line. And you can see my first 2 actually do make an X. But then you can see I've got this gap over here on the edge, and I want to make sure that's all filled in. So next I'll probably go maybe back over here to this corner, and then come down close to that first stitch, but still making it look like they intersect, so that I keep this puffiness. Now for my next stitch, I might split some threads and come up here in the middle and go to the side again. So the point really of this area is that we're going to keep intersecting threads and try not to pull anything down tight to the fabric. We're going to leave it poofy. And at any point, if you feel like your threads are starting to sink down too much, you can see you just slide your needle under and pull it up a little bit. You're also not going to worry too much about getting a stitch everywhere along the edge of this line like we do in satin stitch. The point is more to go for a full look across the middle. So when I'm looking at this straight on, you don't see any fabric here in the middle. That's what we're going for. With that said, I still want to make sure I'm not stitching outside of my lines. Now, you may have noticed that today we're upside down. And this is a prime example of what I talked about the first day. I don't stitch straight on in a hoop stand most all of the time. It is much easier, especially with my little hands, to hold an 8-inch hoop right here at the edge and stitch and work from than it is to hold it from the far edge and try and stitch at the top. So rotate your hoop, stitch where it's comfortable. Don't make yourself do more work than you need to. All right, I'll keep stitching here. Speed it up just a little bit. All right, I'm back. I have finished Joseph and tied it off. And I just want to show you real quick, if it'll focus for me, just what this looks like finished. Here from the side, you can see it has nice, big, tall stitches next to our flat satin stitches. And that's what we want. It's going to kind of look messy and intertwining. You just want it to fill in the space and look like a nice, big headband close to the thin satin stitch. So on to Mary. Mary's head, first part here, is French knots. And we're going to use 3 strands, so we're back to our small needle, and we're going to wrap 2 or 3 times around the needle. Now, I don't want you to stress about these French knots because they're filler French knots. They aren't standalone French knots. So that means you can mess it up, and there will be something else close by to cover up your mistake. Hold on while I re-anchor my floss. I just pulled it out without meaning to. Accidents happen. All right, here we go again. So I'm going to start down here on the edge. And this teenier part right here to start, this really skinny part, we're going to fill this part in mostly with 2 wrap knots. And then as we get up here to the top, we're going to use 3 wrap knots because those are going to be bigger. So here's how we make a French knot. One hand holds the needle, the other hand is going to wrap the floss around the needle 2 times. Now I'm going to go back into the fabric, and I want to go in down into a new hole. I don't want to go in the same hole that I came up. I want a new hole that's close by. Then while still holding tension, you see I'm holding on here, you pull, just put lotion on my hands, probably not my smartest idea. There we go. The thread through, and you have a lovely French knot. And now we'll repeat right here. We're going to go up, pull all the way up, and then we're going to wrap once, twice around the needle. Now I'm going down in a new hole, and I'm not pulling super hard on the string. I'm just keeping it from unraveling. I hold it over here, put it in, and just hold the end of the floss until you've pulled all the way through. Now at this point, it's just rinse and repeat. So, 2 wraps. I don't like that spot. I felt like I caught a knot or something on the back. Let's try again. 1, 1, 2. Pretty sure, yep, 2. Down here. Now, if you find you have an awkward space that looks smaller, what is this tail I keep catching? Can you see this fuzz I have right here? This is happening to you. It means you have a tail on the back side that you're catching. What I like to do is I just kind of pull on my floss until it goes away from the back and then pull up again. And most of the time, this solves my problem and the fuzz goes away. So, 2 wraps, and we'll pull this one down. Now right here, this space is a little open, but probably not big enough for a full knot like this. So I'm gonna sneak just a little one wrap knot in here to make sure that the space is all the way filled, but that the knots don't go over the edges. Oh, I'm caught on the top of my hoop. Well, this is an adventure for you. Since this is all nice and loose, I'm just going to pull out and untie my knot here. And we're going to retry that again. Now, if I hadn't had that loose and it was tight and I couldn't undo what I had just done, my mistake there, I would have just pulled it tight, and if it sticked up way funny, given that I'm just at the start, I might have cut it out and started again, or just stitched around it and let it be. All right, you can see I'm catching whatever that is again. I think I might just trim that off this time. One wrap to fill in this little space. And now I'm going to pull in. Now there's another little space. This is kind of how French knots go. You're going to keep finding little spaces and just keep filling them in till the space is all full. All right, that looks better. Now I'm going to keep making knots, and I'll check in a minute. All right, I'm going to start adding some 3 wrap knots. You can see I filled this bottom part and I'm kind of coming up here, and I'll add some 3 wrap, maybe a couple of 2 wrap knots, just making them a little bigger up here at the top. Now, some helpful hints about French knots. You want to think medium tension. You don't want to pull super hard on the needle, or it's going to be really hard to pull your needle through the knot. I could think about just kind of sliding the knot down the needle till it touches the fabric, and then you can see I even let go, and it just kind of sits there when you've pulled it down to the fabric. And then I'm basically just holding the thread out of the way while I pull the knot tight. Now you can see this clearly is a two-handed process. So if you're doing this and you don't have a hoop stand like I do, what you can do is you can do this and set it down on your lap, or the table in front of you is always a good choice. I also like to use the edge of the table, given that we're at the edge of the hoop. Sometimes you can just set it off the edge of the table just a little bit, so you can poke your needle down and then pick it up to pull through. I've also put my hoop on top of like a container of panko or something, like a tall cylinder that's gonna hold it up off the table but not tip your hoop over. The point is, it's okay to set it down and then pick it back up if you need to. You don't have to try and be a Wonder Human and hold it all in your hand while making this, especially if you're just learning how. Now you'll find as you get going here and have made lots of knots, it's hard to see, but my thread is starting to twist together and make it harder to make the knots. Right there, you see this? It's spinning together. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to stop after this knot with my thread on the back. You could do this on the top, but since I'm in a hoop stand, and I'm just letting it hang straight down from my hoop, and it untwists itself, you know, like an old school phone cord. And then when I go to stitch here again, the thread will be much more agreeable and not tangling on itself. You can see it's just laying nice and flat now. All right, let's finish this space up here. All right, we've finished all of our French knots, and as you can see, they're kind of really smooshed in here nice and tight. This is for two reasons. One, I think it makes a fantastic texture, and two, it's going to hide any imperfections in these knots, which is a great time to learn French knots because they're kind of just smooshed in here, and there's very little, all the little things that might bug you about one knot by itself aren't going to show up here. If you do have a knot that got wonky and it has like a loop or something that's hanging out there, something you can do is to just thread a single strand of floss on your needle and come up, catch that loop with your needle, and then pull it back in somewhere and pull it down tight, and it should again just disappear into this lovely French knot texture. Okay, we have made it to the star. So we're going to use 3 strands of 7/8 and hopefully this will focus. It's kind of close. Oh, there we go. So what's going on here is we're just going to kind of rotate around the outside of the star to make this shape. It's kind of like if you took a line here, and then we're going to rotate it here and here and here and here, and just keep going all the way around until we've stitched around the entire outside of the star, and it'll build up and make a lovely texture in the middle of the star. So you need to start at either the top of the star or the bottom of the star. We're going to start at either one of those points. I'm going to start at the bottom of the star, which is the top of your screen, but still the bottom of the star. And stitch 1 goes from point to point. Now, I'm going to rotate towards the right. If you wanted to rotate towards the left, same process. We're going to go to the right. So I'm going to go up on the first part of the line that I can see right here, next to my first stitch. And then I'm going to go down. So we're rotating, well, my circle's going this way. We're going clockwise. So clockwise from here, I'm going to go down on the first part of the star that I can see. Now I'm going to do the same thing, rotating clockwise here. Come up, and then continue here. Now we're going to keep going, but we want to make sure that when we come to the cross here of this point to point, that this is a straight stitch across. So you might have to adjust as you get closer here, make some of these farther apart or some of these closer together to make sure that this stitch goes straight across. At the last stitch probably, because you can see here on my way up I have a stitch here and a stitch here, and I'm matching here, and then I should match about here, and then I don't need to repeat this. You can see at the top I got lucky. Here we match and here we match. So I'm just going to come up right here on the side, just like we have been, trying to get nice and close. And then come down, and just for symmetry's sake, I'm going to match where that last stitch came up and kind of guide that last little bit of the star into place. Now, to make these star lines, it's real simple. We're just going to make a big straight stitch. So all that means is you come up at one end of the line and then you go down on the other. And then we'll repeat the process. We'll come up on one end and go down on the other. Same thing over here for the last two. And then we will anchor off. And the only thing left will be the outline for Mary and Joseph's face. All right, I'll anchor that. All right, so all that's left to do is we're gonna do whipped back stitch along this line here for Joseph's head and this line for Mary's head. And it's the same process as for baby Jesus when we stitched his head. The one thing you want to note is that here on Joseph's head, your line should match up against the edge of here. So we aren't going all the way around the outside. It's a little short little line, stop, start, bigger line, all the way up to his neck. Now, since you know whip back stitch now, I'm not going to talk you through it today. I'm just going to remind you that we have 2 more days left after today. We're going to cover Joseph's turkey work stitches and Mary's woven wheel stitches the next 2 days. And don't forget to post your progress on your project on Instagram, so you can be entered into the drawing and so I can see all of your hard work. Thanks for stitching with me today, and I'm super excited for tomorrow. Happy stitching!